Hey guys, and welcome to another one of my tutorials. So in this video, we're going to be covering event dispatchers and explaining what they are, and more importantly, why and when you should use them. So I've set up this little example project here, and basically the way it works is when I press F, he spawns this little bomb thing, and then once it stops moving, it will turn red. And then after 1 or 2 seconds, when it's red, it will explode. And then you can see in the bottom left, it says bomb available, which means I can spawn as many of these as I want. And so we're going to be looking at this project and adding a little bit of stuff to it just to kind of show you guys when and why you'd be using event dispatchers. So if you don't know what event dispatchers are, I will show you real quickly. So if you come over here to any blueprint, really, any actor, there is a section at the bottom underneath your variables called event dispatchers. And so this is what I'm talking about. So if you've never even seen this before, I'd still recommend watching the video because this is a very powerful tool to use. And a lot of people don't know about them and never use them. But if you do know what they are, then you can use them, and it makes the design of your program a lot nicer in certain cases. So we'll come back to this later, but I wanted to give you guys a quick high level overview, just an explanation of what they are and why you should use them. Because I've seen a lot of tutorials that actually go in and show you how to hook them up. They don't really explain why you should use these. So I think a good analogy for event dispatchers, it would be a microwave. So if you think about a microwave, if you want to go and heat up some food, you go and you put your food inside the microwave, and then at that point you have two options, right? So you press start, and then you have two options. You can either stand there and watch the microwave and watch the timer go down to 0, and then know that your food's ready, or you can go and back to the living room or back to your room and play video games or watch TV and just wait for the microwave to alert you that the food's ready when it starts to beep. So those are your two different options. So an event dispatcher is the second option, where you put the food in the microwave and then you leave and you just say, hey, microwave, please notify me when the food's ready, as opposed to just standing there and every frame or every second, you're just looking at the microwave and saying, hey, is it done? 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 So those are the two differences, or when you might want to use an event dispatcher. So if you can kind of keep that in mind, and if you ever run into a situation in code where you really just want something to notify you when it's ready and you don't want to have to stand there and check every frame to see if it's done, then that's a good use for an event dispatcher. So with that being said, let's kind of look at this example. So what I want to do is, let me run this again. What I want to do is right now I can just spam these bombs. So I want to make it so that I can only spawn a bomb when the previous bomb has destroyed. So that way there can only be one bomb at a time. So let's say I wanted to do something like that. Well, that would be a perfect use for an event dispatcher, because we basically are telling the system, just like the microwave, please let me know when this bomb gets destroyed. I don't want to have to check every single frame to see if it's destroyed. I just want to know when it gets destroyed, and at that point, I'll know I can spawn more bombs again. So if you look at our code here, all we're doing inside the player is we're saying when the F key is pressed, spawn our BP bomb actor, and it just spawns it kind of in front of the player and moving forward. So one of the things about event dispatchers that you might not know is that you probably are already using them without even realizing it. And what I mean by that is a lot of these events over here that you can override are actually event dispatchers that you're binding to. So for example, we want to know when the bomb gets destroyed, because when the bomb gets destroyed, we want to be allowed to throw it again. So the first thing we're going to do is we have this bomb available bool over here. It's not actually being used anywhere yet. I just created it because I knew we would need it. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag this guy over here, and we're going to set him to false right after we fire the bomb. So now you can see when we run this and we press F, you can see at the bottom left it says bombs are now unavailable, because that little UI is bound to that boolean. And if I try to press F again, it still works. And that's because we need to actually check this. So if we come over here before the F and we add a little branch, so let's drag this guy in and we'll add a branch. And we'll say only allow us to spawn a bomb if there is a bomb available. So now if we run this again, we should be able to press F once, and then if we try to press F again, it doesn't do anything. So I'm spamming F and nothing's happening. So that's good, but we want to make it so that when the bomb explodes, this boolean gets set back to true so that we can fire bombs again. So what we could do is we could check it. So like inside the event tick, we check if the bomb still exists, and we do that every single frame. And then when the bomb gets destroyed, we'll know that it no longer exists, and then we can set it back to true. But we don't want to do that, right? We don't want to stand in front of the microwave and check every frame if our food's done, when we could just go and wait for it to start beeping at us. So that's what we're going to do. So what we can do here, and this is what I was saying, some event dispatchers you probably already use and don't even realize it. So you can drag off of this. So this is the bomb that we've just spawned. And you can say bind to, and when you type bind to, all of these things that pop up, all these different events that you can bind to are actually event dispatchers that just come with Unreal. So actors already have a lot of event dispatchers hooked up for them. So you can see like when it takes damage, when it takes point damage, radio damage, when it's destroyed, when it overlaps something. So all of these are actually event dispatchers that are being dispatched from inside the engine that you can bind to. So that's what I'm saying. You probably already use event dispatchers without even realizing it. So we actually don't even need to create one for this case. We will be creating one later in the tutorial. But for right now, I just want to show you that you can make use of event dispatchers without even having to create your own. So like I said, we want to know when it gets destroyed. So we're going to say bind event to onDestroyed. And then we'll just hook this up here, like so. And then what happens here is it creates this little event for you, but if you try to compile it, it gives you an error because you need to actually provide one of these events to it. So to do that, you can drag off this guy, and you have two different options here. You can either say add custom event, and when you do that, it will create a custom event like normal, but it will connect this little pin for you, and then you can call this whatever you want. So we're going to call this on bomb destroyed, and I'll show you guys the second option here in a second. I just want to hook this one up first and show you how it looks. So the idea is that when the bomb gets destroyed, it's going to call this on bomb destroyed event. And so inside of here, what we want to do is we want to set bomb available back to true. So I'm going to copy paste this guy and set it to true. So now if we go ahead and run this, we should see that when the bomb blows up, our bomb available becomes green and available again. So there we go. And now if I try to press F, I can spawn another bomb. And if I try to press F before it destroys, it won't let me. So that's a very simple, basic use case of using an event dispatcher. And then the other option, I'll show you guys real quick, because some people don't know this. So if you don't want to use a custom event here, and the reason you might not want to do that is A, for organization's sake, but B, if you're just using a custom event, this is actually a public event. So anybody who has a reference to the third-person character would be able to call this event because it's public. And it doesn't really make sense for anybody else to call this event, so ideally you'd want it to be private. So if you want an event dispatcher, or if you want an event that's bound to an event dispatcher to be private, you can still do that. You can't do it with an event, so we have to delete this guy, and I'm going to delete this guy as well. You have to do it with a function, and in order to do that, you can say create event, and it gives you this little green node, which is kind of confusing looking at first, but it's actually pretty simple. So in this dropdown here, you can select the function that you want to bind this to, and then instead of calling an event, the red event, it will call this function. And you'll notice there's actually options here for creating a matching function or even creating a matching event. So since we don't have a function yet, I'm just going to say create matching function, and you'll notice as soon as I click this, it generates this auto function for us. It doesn't know what to call it, so it just calls it third person character auto gen function. But if you look over here on the left, we can actually rename it to whatever we want. So we can call it on bomb destroyed. Oh, we might have to compile and do this again because it was probably already saved from the last one. On bomb destroyed. There we go. And then the cool thing is we can come over here now and we can set this to private. So again, since this is now private, nobody else can call this function, even if they have a reference to the character, which makes it a little bit safer because we obviously don't want anybody else calling this function except for when the bomb gets destroyed. And then inside of here, we can do whatever we want. So we can take in our bombs available, and we can set it back to true. And so we can compile, save, and then just to show you, if we come back here and we look, you can see we're now binding this event to this function, on bomb destroyed. So now if we play this, it should do the same thing as it did before, but now we have it inside of a private function, which is a little bit better in my opinion. So if we press F, and it spawns it. We can't press F again until it explodes. Oh, that time it didn't actually work. What did we do? You know, I've noticed sometimes in Unreal Engine 5, you have to actually select none here and then select it back to on bomb destroyed. I think it's just a bug with Unreal Engine 5 just because it's in preview, but sometimes it doesn't call it the first time, and you really only have to do that once. So now if we press play, it should work. So bomb unavailable, and then it destroys, and then bomb available. So now it's working as we expected. So the last part of this tutorial is I want to show you how to create your own custom event dispatcher. And how to bind to it and call it. So let's say, for example, going back to our bomb here, let's say that instead of waiting until the bomb explodes, what if we want to make it so that you can spawn a new bomb as soon as the bomb turns red? So right there. If we wanted to do that, we could use this same setup inside of here where we bind to it, but we don't have an event that we can bind to that's called, you know, on bomb turned red, right? So that's what we really want. So if you want something like that, you can always make event dispatchers for yourself. So if we go into the BP bomb, and I know we haven't looked at this guy yet, but he's actually really simple. It's just, all it's doing is just setting the color, all it's doing is binding to this on projectile stopped event. So if you look up here, we have our projectile movement component. And what we've done here is we've actually bound to this on projectile stop. And this is actually another event dispatcher, believe it or not. Because if you look, if we drag in our projectile movement and we say bind event to on projectile stop, you can see it right here. So this event that I'm using is actually it's actually an event dispatcher as well. So that's what I'm saying. You probably use these without even realizing it. But basically the idea is that this event gets called whenever the bomb comes to a stop. And at that point, we are setting it to red. And then we are setting a timer from anywhere from 1 to 2 seconds. And then after those 1 to 2 seconds are up, we destroy the actor. So instead of waiting for the bomb to destroy, we want to call an event dispatcher whenever it turns red. So we can create our own event dispatcher by clicking this little plus button, and we will call it we'll call it on armed, meaning this is when the bomb becomes armed. And I'm just calling it armed because when it turns red, it kind of looks like it's armed, right? So on armed. And then we press enter here and it saves it. And then you'll notice it kind of looks like a normal variable or a function over here. And we can actually drag it in just like a normal variable or a function, except we get a whole bunch of options here. So I'll just explain what these are real quick. So calling it is just like you would a normal function. So if you actually click this, you can see it calls it, and it does it just like a normal function would, like destroy actor or set timer by event. It just calls the event, like it triggers the event. So this is the same as the microwave starting to beep, right? It's calling the alert function, letting everybody know that hey, the food's done. The other options here are bind. So this is kind of the opposite of calling it. This is binding to the event and saying, hey, please let me know when this event gets called. So in the microwave example, the person who puts the food in the microwave would bind to the food ready event or the beeping event, and so that the person who put the food in would be notified when the food is ready. And the cool thing about event dispatchers is an infinite amount of people can bind to these events. So if you had 10 people over and you were making nachos in the microwave, all 10 people could bind to this event and get notified when the nachos are ready. And it doesn't matter where they are in the house because they're all going to hear the beeping sound. So that's another cool thing about event dispatchers is you can have as many people bind to them as you want. And then unbind and bind all are pretty self-explanatory. So if you no longer care about the nachos and you don't want to hear the beep, then you can unbind from the event. And unbind all just unbinds everybody. And then this one actually implements the event. So you can see over here, this is an example of implementing the on projectile stop event. I usually don't really use this one too much. I don't know why. I'm usually either binding or unbinding to it. But this actually implements the event. And you can only do this inside of the blueprint that actually defines the event dispatcher. And then the final one is, what was the final one? Oh, assign. So I'm just going to click this so you can see the difference. So if you click assign, it actually calls bind. So if we look at bind here, so this is bind on the right, and this is assign on the left. So it actually does the exact same thing, but when you click assign, it just adds the event for you, just as a little convenience thing, but they're really the same thing. So let me delete these. So again, what we want to do, going back to our bomb thing here, is we want to make it so that when the bomb is armed or turns red, we dispatch this event. So what we want to do here is right before we destroy it, we just want to say, we want to do it up here. So as soon as the projectile stops moving, we set it to red, and then we want to call this armed event. So we'll say onArmed, and then we'll say call, and then we'll hook this up right here. So this is what it now looks like. So when the projectile stops moving, we set the color to red, and then we call onArmed, and then you don't have to worry about this. It's just setting a timer for 2 seconds or anywhere between 1 and 2 seconds. And after that amount of time, it just goes ahead and destroys the actor. So if we go back, compile and save, and we go back to our third-person character, let's now change this binding here to bind to our onArmed event. So I'm going to delete these two guys, drag off our bomb, and say bind to onArmed, just like so. And so now it looks very similar to how it did before, except we're binding to onArmed. And again, we can say create event. And for the dropdown here, we can select create a matching function for us. So the reason we can't use onBombDestroyed again, well, the main reason here is that it has an input parameter to it, and our event dispatcher doesn't, so it's not going to allow us to bind to this function. So that's why we need to say create a matching function. And this one we'll call it onBombArmed. And then inside of here, we want to set bomb available to true. And there we go. So we don't need this onBombDestroy anymore, so I'm just going to delete it since we aren't using it. And then I'm just going to set this guy to private, compile, save. And then let's just look at this again real quick before we run it. So all we're doing, real simple, is we're spawning the bomb. We're binding to the onArmed event. We're saying, hey, please let us know when the bomb gets armed. And when the bomb does get armed, it's going to call onBombArmed. And then inside of here, we're going to set bomb available back to true. So now if you watch it, as soon as the bomb turns red, the bottom left should turn from unavailable to available. So there it goes. And then as soon as it turns red, I can fire a new bomb off. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. There's one more thing I want to just point out. I'm not going to go into detail on it because it's really self-explanatory. But if you click on onArmed or any event dispatcher that you make, you can add inputs to it. So I'll just show you as an example. I don't have a logical thing to show you, but you can just hit a plus button just like any other function, and it will add an input parameter. And you can change the type just like a normal function, and you can give it a name just like any function. So we could call this, like my number, but this can be whatever you want. For onArmed, it doesn't make sense. We don't need to provide anything because we're just saying, hey, it got armed. But, you could always provide any sort of information that you want. For example, the destroy actor one, it provides you the actor that was destroyed. And so you can pass along information. But the important thing to know here about event dispatchers is it only has inputs. It doesn't actually have outputs. And the reason for that is because when you're calling an event dispatcher, like I said before, the event dispatcher can be bound to many different people. So it doesn't make sense for an event dispatcher to have a return value since it's going out to potentially, hundreds of different people. If it had a return value, you'd have to somehow get the return values from all those different people, or maybe choose the one you prefer or something. It doesn't really make sense, right? Because it's basically just a microwave beeping and saying, hey, the food's ready. Nobody's returning any information to us. So I just wanted to point that out. So if you do add a input here, you can see if you just refresh the call, you can see my number now shows up, and you could pass in whatever you want here. So we'll just pass in 8. And then if you go back to the third person character, you'll notice if we try to compile this, it's going to give us an error. And it's giving us an error because the function that we have bound to it, onBombArm, if you look at it, it doesn't take in an integer. So it's going to say, hey, you can't bind this event dispatcher to this function because the function signature doesn't match. So if we want it to match, we just need to add an integer here. And it doesn't actually matter what you call it since it's an integer. As long as the type matches, it's okay. So we called it my number. Now if we compile this, you can see it's now fine because our signature matches. And if you wanted to, we can just print this out just so you can see that it passes along this 8 all the way through the chain. I'm just going to print this guy out, and then we'll run it. And you'll notice if you look at the top left, when the bomb turns red, it prints out 8. So you can always pass information from the person calling the event to the people binding the event, but you can't return information back to the caller. So that's one difference between event dispatcher functions and normal functions. I just wanted to point that out. But yeah, so that concludes this tutorial / informational video. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe. I also have a Discord if you guys want to join. It's in the link of the description of this video. If you guys want to join, ask questions, or just meet new game dev people, feel free. And there's also information if you want to donate. That's always appreciated as well. So thanks you guys for watching. Let me know what you think of this type of video. This is kind of a new thing for me. Usually I do tutorials, but this is more of an informative thing. So let me know what you think. See you guys in the next video.